What would you do if doctors said your dog would never walk again? When experts told Clayton Miller to put down the injured German Shepherd he found on his Texas ranch, he made a decision that changed everything. In the next few minutes, you'll witness how one man's refusal to give up and his daughter's unwavering belief turned impossible into a miracle that's now saving thousands of dogs nationwide. Hit subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. Let's meet Ranger, the dog that proved everyone wrong. The autumn breeze carried the scent of cedar and dust across Clayton Miller's sprawling ranch in Hill Country, Texas. The 1,500-acre property, with its rolling pastures and scattered live oaks, represented everything the 52-year-old entrepreneur had worked for since founding his oil equipment manufacturing company 20 years ago. Clayton stood on his wraparound porch, a steaming mug of black coffee warming his weathered hands. At 6'2" with salt and pepper hair and deep-set blue eyes, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a self-made man. The morning sunlight cast long shadows across the property as he surveyed his kingdom, the white-fenced paddocks, the state-of-the-art barn, and the old orange grove his grandfather had planted decades before. Another day in paradise, he murmured to himself, a habit he'd developed in the 3 years since his divorce. The emptiness of the massive ranch house still caught him off guard sometimes, especially on quiet mornings like this one, when Emily was with her mother in Houston. Clayton descended the porch steps, boots crunching on the gravel driveway as he began his daily inspection of the property. He'd just rounded the barn when his ranch manager, Luis, came jogging toward him, agitation clear on his face. "Mr. Miller, there's something you need to see, sir," Luis called, gesturing toward the orange grove, by the old tree at the far end. "What is it? Another coyote problem?" Clayton asked, falling into step beside the younger man. "No, sir. It's a dog. Bad shape. Must have been hit by a car on the highway and crawled under the fence." As they approached the ancient orange tree that stood apart from the others, Clayton spotted it. A large German Shepherd, its tan and black coat matted with dirt and what appeared to be dried blood. The animal lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of its ribcage. "Jesus," Clayton whispered, crouching beside the injured animal. The dog's rear legs were twisted unnaturally, and deep lacerations crossed its hindquarters. Despite its condition, the dog's amber eyes opened slightly, fixing on Clayton with a gaze that seemed to hold both fear and dignity. "Should I get my rifle, sir?" Luis asked quietly, the practical question of a man who'd grown up on ranches where injured animals weren't left to suffer. Clayton felt an unexpected tightening in his chest. "No," he replied firmly. "Call Dr. Perez instead. Tell her it's an emergency." Luis looked surprised. "Sir, that dog's spine is likely shattered. Even Dr. Perez will probably just put him down." Clayton carefully removed his jacket and gently laid it over the trembling animal. "Maybe so, but that's not our call to make. This fella deserves a fighting chance." The dog's eyes remained locked on Clayton's, and he felt something pass between them, a connection he couldn't explain. Despite being a practical businessman who prided himself on rational decisions, Clayton felt an inexplicable certainty that this moment mattered. "What do you think, boy?" Clayton spoke softly to the shepherd. "You're not ready to give up just yet, are you?" To his amazement, the dog's tail thumped once against the ground. "That's what I thought." Clayton nodded, gently stroking the dog's head. "Luis, call Dr. Perez, then bring my truck around. And grab some blankets from the tack room. We need to move him without causing more damage." As Luis hurried off, Clayton remained beside the injured animal, his mind already calculating logistics, costs, and possibilities. It was the same methodical approach that had built his business empire, now turned towards saving a broken dog he'd found under an orange tree. "Hang in there, fella," he whispered. "I don't know why you ended up here, but you picked the right orange grove to collapse in." The sterile lights of Austin Veterinary Emergency Center reflected off the polished floors as Clayton paced the waiting room. His boots left subtle dirt marks with each step, a reminder of the rushed journey from his ranch. It had been 3 hours since Dr. Perez had stabilized the German Shepherd and transferred him to this specialized facility in the city. "Mr. Miller?" A tall woman in blue scrubs approached, her face carrying the practiced, neutral expression of someone about to deliver difficult news. "I'm Dr. Rachel Wilson, head of veterinary surgery. Could we talk privately?" Clayton followed her to a small consultation room where X-rays illuminated a light box on the wall. The images showed a canine spine with clear fractures across multiple vertebrae. "I wish I had better news," Dr. Wilson began, gesturing to the X-rays. "The dog has sustained severe trauma to his lower spine. T12 and L1 vertebrae are completely shattered, and there's significant spinal cord damage." She paused, meeting Clayton's eyes directly. Even with surgery, the chances of him regaining function in his hind legs are virtually non-existent. Clayton studied the images with the same intensity he applied to oil equipment schematics. What are his other injuries? Multiple lacerations, dehydration, malnutrition. He was likely astray before the accident. No microchip, no collar. Dr. Wilson's voice softened slightly. "Mr. Miller, I understand you want to help, but the kindest option here is euthanasia. Even if we repair the peripheral damage, this dog will never walk again. He'll need round-the-clock care, regular expression of his bladder, prevention of pressure sores. His name is Ranger." Clayton interrupted quietly. Dr. Wilson blinked. "I'm sorry, I'm calling him Ranger," Clayton repeated, turning from the X-rays to face her. "And I want to know what surgery would cost, not why I shouldn't do it." The veterinarian sighed. "Mr. Miller, I appreciate your compassion, but as a medical professional, I have to be straightforward. The surgery alone would cost upwards of $15,000, with no guarantee of success beyond stabilizing the spine. The aftercare would be extensive and expensive, and the dog, Ranger, would still be paralyzed." Clayton's jaw tightened. "I didn't get where I am by accepting the first no I heard, doctor. I've built companies out of nothing but a good idea and stubborn determination." "This isn't a business venture," Dr. Wilson countered, frustration edging into her professional tone. "This is a living creature that will suffer." "Will he be in pain after surgery?" Clayton asked firmly. "With proper medication, no, but then suffering is a matter of perspective," Clayton interrupted again. "Schedule the surgery, and give me a list of what equipment I'll need for his aftercare." Dr. Wilson crossed her arms. "Mr. Miller, I have 3 other surgeons who will all tell you the same thing. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed?" Clayton looked back at the X-rays, remembering the determined look in the dog's amber eyes. "Let me ask you something, doctor. In your entire career, have you ever been absolutely certain about anything? Because in mine, certainty is usually just another word for limited imagination." The consultation room fell silent as they locked eyes in a battle of professional opinions. Finally, Dr. Wilson nodded curtly. "I'll schedule the surgery for tomorrow morning. In the meantime, you can see him briefly. He's sedated but stable." She handed him a clipboard. "You'll need to sign these forms acknowledging that you understand the prognosis and financial responsibilities." As Clayton signed his name with the same confidence he used on million-dollar contracts, Dr. Wilson added more softly, "For what it's worth, Mr. Miller, I hope I'm wrong. But I've been doing this for 15 years, and science doesn't often grant miracles." Clayton handed back the clipboard with a thin smile. "Then it's a good thing I don't rely on miracles, doctor. Just hard work and the occasional calculated risk." He paused at the door. "And sometimes, the things experts say are impossible just haven't been properly attempted yet." Later, standing beside the sedated Ranger, Clayton gently placed his hand on the dog's head. "Don't worry, boy," he whispered. "They don't know what you're made of yet, but we're going to show them." 8-year-old Emily Miller pressed her face against the SUV window as her mother's car rolled up the long gravel driveway of her father's ranch. Her sandy blonde hair was pulled into 2 slightly uneven braids, and her freckled nose scrunched in excitement when she spotted her father waiting on the porch. "Daddy," she squealed, fumbling with her seatbelt before the car had fully stopped. Clayton's weathered face broke into a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. He knelt down as Emily barreled into his arms, her weekend backpack bouncing against her small shoulders. "There's my cowgirl," he said, lifting her up in a bear hug. "How was school this week?" Before Emily could answer, her mother, Diane, stepped out of the car with a tight smile. At 45, Diane Miller remained as elegant and composed as when Clayton had first met her at a Houston charity gala 15 years ago. "She has math homework," Diane said, handing Clayton a folder. "And she needs to practice for her spelling test on Monday." Clayton nodded, the familiar tension settling between them. "We'll get it done." Diane hesitated, then added more softly. I heard about your new project. Luis mentioned something about a dog. It's complicated, Clayton replied. It always is with you, Diane said with a resigned sigh. I'll pick her up Sunday at 6. After Diane's car disappeared down the driveway, Emily tugged on her father's hand. What dog, Daddy? Did you get a puppy? Clayton looked down at his daughter's expectant face and realized he hadn't planned how to explain Ranger's situation. Not exactly, sweetheart. I found an injured dog, and he's staying in the guest house while he recovers. Emily's eyes widened. Can I see him? Please. He's very sick, Em. He had a big operation, and he can't move around much. Emily's expression grew serious. Is he going to die? Clayton crouched to her level, looking directly into her earnest blue eyes, so much like his own. The doctors think he might never walk again, but I'm not giving up on him. Sometimes people need someone to believe in them even when things seem impossible. Emily nodded with the solemn understanding that children sometimes display in moments of gravity. Like when I couldn't ride Thunder because I was scared, but you said I could do it anyway? Clayton smiled, recalling how his tiny daughter had overcome her fear of the gentle ranch pony. Exactly like that. Then I want to help, Emily declared with finality. Later that afternoon, Clayton led Emily to the converted guest house, where Ranger lay on a specialized orthopedic bed. Medical supplies and monitoring equipment occupied one wall of the room. The German Shepherd's hind legs were immobilized in a custom brace, and in 4-drip delivered pain medication and antibiotics. Emily stopped in the doorway, her eyes growing wide at the sight. Clayton felt a sudden worry that the medical setup might frighten her. Remember, he's getting better, Clayton whispered, squeezing her small hand. To his surprise, Emily didn't hesitate. She approached the dog slowly, her movements measured and gentle in a way that made Clayton's heart swell with pride. Hi, Ranger, she said softly. I'm Emily. The dog's amber eyes opened, focusing on the small figure before him. His tail gave a weak thump against the bed. He knows his name. Emily gasped, delight spreading across her face. Looks like he does, Clayton said, watching in amazement as Ranger lifted his head slightly toward Emily's outstretched hand. Can I come see him every day? Emily asked, carefully stroking Ranger's ear. I can read to him. Ms. Abernathy says reading out loud helps you get better at it, and maybe it will help Ranger get better too. Clayton swallowed past the sudden tightness in his throat. I think that's a wonderful idea, Em. And I can bring him special treats, she continued, her ideas flowing faster as her initial caution transformed into excitement. And we can make him a special blanket, and I can tell him about school, and Clayton watched as his daughter chatted animatedly to the injured dog, whose eyes remained fixed on her with what looked remarkably like attention. In that moment, Clayton saw something he hadn't anticipated. Not just Emily's compassion, but a connection forming between child and animal that transcended the clinical reality of Ranger's condition. That evening, as Clayton tucked Emily into bed, she asked sleepily, Daddy, do you think Ranger was scared when he got hurt? Clayton sat on the edge of her bed, considering the question. I think he probably was, sweetheart. But he's not scared anymore, Emily stated with certainty. Because he knows we won't give up on him. As Clayton turned out the light, he realized that his impulsive decision to save the injured dog might have given his daughter something neither he nor Diane had managed since their divorce. A sense of purpose and unconditional connection in a world that had become confusingly divided for a child of 8. Clayton's office in the east wing of the ranch house had always been his sanctuary, a place where million-dollar deals were negotiated over speakerphone and business strategies mapped out on his expansive mahogany desk. Today, however, it hosted an unusual gathering. 3 weeks had passed since Ranger's surgery, and while the German Shepherd had survived against the odds, his condition remained largely unchanged. I appreciate you both coming on such short notice, Clayton said, gesturing toward the leather chairs facing his desk. To his left sat Dr. Mason Bryant, a lanky man in his mid-40s with rounded glasses and a tweed jacket that couldn't quite disguise his athletic build. To his right was Ava Ramirez, a compact woman with intense dark eyes and hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Your offer was compelling, Mr. Miller, Dr. Bryant replied, sliding his glasses up his nose. As the head of biomechanical engineering at the University of Texas, he rarely made house calls. Though I must admit, I'm more accustomed to developing prosthetics for humans than canines. Ava nodded, her expression professional but warm. The same goes for me. My practice in San Diego specializes in canine rehabilitation, but the videos you sent of Ranger's condition represent a significant challenge. She leaned forward slightly. To be clear, you understand that full recovery is statistically unlikely? Clayton's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Statistics are just history, Ms. Ramirez. They tell us what happened before, not what's possible now. He stood, walking to the large window overlooking the property. In the distance, the guest house where Ranger was staying was just visible beyond the old oak trees. For different veterinary specialists have told me to put that dog down, Clayton continued. And maybe they're right. But I've spent my life proving experts wrong, and I'm not about to stop now. He turned back to face them. Besides, there's more at stake than just Ranger's mobility. Your daughter, Dr. Bryant concluded quietly. Clayton nodded. Emily reads to him every day after school. She's created charts tracking his medication, his food intake, even his bathroom schedule. A smile briefly softened his features. She's convinced he's going to walk again, and I won't be the one to tell her otherwise unless we've tried everything humanly possible. Ava glanced down at the medical reports spread across the desk. His post-operative recovery has been remarkably good, considering the extent of the damage. No infections, good healing of the surgical sites. But the neurological prognosis remains poor, Dr. Bryant added, studying the MRI images. The spinal cord compression was severe, and even with the vertebral stabilization, signal transmission to the hind limbs is minimal at best. Clayton returned to his chair. So what would you two try if money and conventional thinking weren't obstacles? The room fell silent as both specialists considered the question. Finally, Dr. Bryant removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. There are experimental treatments involving electrical stimulation of the damaged neural pathways, he said slowly. Combined with intensive physical therapy, there have been some promising results in similar cases, though mostly in laboratory settings. Ava's eyes lit up. Water therapy could be particularly beneficial. The buoyancy would allow him to attempt movement without full weight bearing. Water therapy, Clayton repeated, his mind already churning with possibilities. Yes, specialized underwater treadmills or swimming pools with controlled environments, Ava explained. But the equipment is expensive and typically only available at major veterinary rehabilitation centers. Clayton leaned back in his chair, a familiar expression crossing his face, one that his business associates would have immediately recognized as dangerous for their negotiating positions. I have something that might work, he said. Luis, he called out, and the ranch manager appeared almost instantly at the door. Take Dr. Bryant and Ms. Ramirez to see the old irrigation tank by the east pasture, and bring Ranger out in the transport wheelchair. 20 minutes later, the group stood beside a massive circular metal tank, approximately 20 feet in diameter and 4 feet deep. Originally used for crop irrigation decades ago, it had been meticulously maintained despite the ranch's shift away from agriculture. With the right modifications, Clayton explained, walking around the perimeter, couldn't this serve as a therapy pool? Dr. Bryant circled the structure, his engineer's mind already calculating. We'd need to install a heating system, filtration, possibly a variable depth platform, and a harness system to support his weight. And cameras, Ava added, professional excitement creeping into her voice. Underwater and external, to monitor his gait pattern and muscle engagement. Plus non-slip surfaces for safety. From his specialized wheelchair beside them, Ranger watched the humans with alert interest, his amber eyes tracking their movements. Emily, who had insisted on joining them after returning from school, knelt beside him. See, Ranger? She whispered loudly enough for all to hear. Daddy's going to build you a special swimming pool so you can learn to walk again. The adults exchanged glances, caution, hope, and determination mingling in the late afternoon sunlight. Clayton caught Ava studying him with a skeptical expression. You think I'm crazy, he stated rather than asked. Ava shook her head slowly. Not crazy, just unusually optimistic about incredibly long odds. Mr. Miller, Dr. Bryant interjected. Even with state-of-the-art equipment, the prognosis is 20 years ago, Clayton interrupted. I started my company with nothing but a patent idea and maxed out credit cards. Every expert said I would fail. He glanced meaningfully at Emily, who was now showing Ranger a drawing she'd made of him swimming. Some things are worth fighting for, even when success isn't guaranteed. Dr. Bryant adjusted his glasses with a small smile. Well, from an engineering perspective, this tank conversion is certainly feasible. And scientifically, the approach has merit. Then let's get started, Clayton said decisively, extending his hand. I'll have contracts drawn up tonight. Whatever resources you need, whatever equipment, just name it. As they shook hands, Emily called out excitedly. Ranger says he wants blue tiles in his pool, Daddy, and maybe some floating toys. For the first time since finding the injured shepherd, Clayton felt something beyond determination. A flicker of genuine hope, sparked not by the expert's cautious assessments, but by his daughter's unwavering belief in a dog who somehow refused to accept defeat. The transformation of the old irrigation tank began at dawn the following Monday. Clayton stood watching as a fleet of trucks and specialized equipment rolled up the ranch's gravel driveway, creating a small dust cloud visible from miles away. The normally quiet Texas property had become a hub of construction activity, drawing curious glances from neighboring ranchers. "You sure about all this, boss?" Luis asked, clipboard in hand as he supervised the arrival of construction materials. "That's the third electrical contractor this morning." Clayton nodded, his eyes fixed on the tank where workers were already installing a complex filtration system. One team for the heating elements, one for the underwater lighting, and one for the monitoring equipment. "We need this done right, and we need it done fast." Dr. Bryant emerged from his temporary office, a converted storage room near the barn, carrying rolled blueprints under his arm. 3 weeks of beard stubble shadowed his jawline, evidence of the long hours he'd been putting in at the ranch. "We've got a challenge with the variable depth platform," he announced, spreading the blueprints across the hood of Clayton's truck. "The hydraulic system I designed needs more power than we initially calculated." Clayton studied the technical drawings, his brow furrowing. "Can we tap into the main power grid for the ranch?" "That would require rewiring half your property," Dr. Bryant replied, tracing a line across the diagram. "But I have another idea. What about solar? This is Texas, after all. Sunshine is something we've got plenty of." Clayton's face brightened. "I like the way you think, Doctor. Make it happen." Nearby, Ava was directing the installation of specialized underwater cameras, her usual California casual attire replaced by practical work clothes and boots. She caught Clayton's eye and walked over, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Your contractors think I'm insane," she said bluntly. "They've never installed a camera system designed to track muscle movements in an aquatic environment before." "That's because no one's built something like this before," Clayton replied. "At least not for a dog." Ava folded her arms, her expression turning serious. "Clayton, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me. We've been working on this project for weeks now, and you've spent—" She gestured at the construction site. "What must be hundreds of thousands of dollars already." "Your point?" Clayton asked, his tone cooling slightly. "My point is that I don't want you or Emily to be devastated if this doesn't work. The science behind what we're attempting is sound, but Ranger's injuries are severe. Even with all this," she waved toward the tank, "there's still a very real possibility that he'll never walk independently again." Clayton's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a small voice piped up from behind them. "He's going to walk again," Emily stated with absolute conviction. She stood holding her backpack, having just been dropped off by her mother after school. "Ranger told me so." Ava crouched down to Emily's level, her voice gentling. "Emily, sweetie, I know how much you care about Ranger. We all do, and we're doing everything possible to help him. But sometimes, even when we try our very hardest—" "No," Emily interrupted, her small chin jutting forward in a gesture so reminiscent of her father that Ava blinked in surprise. "You don't understand. Ranger is stronger than everyone thinks. He just needs our help to remember how to use his legs." Clayton placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Why don't you go read to Ranger for a while, Em?" Dr. Bryant brought him a new therapeutic cushion that helps with his circulation. Emily nodded, but fixed Ava with a final determined look before heading toward the guest house, where Ranger was resting. Once she was out of earshot, Clayton turned back to Ava. "I appreciate your concern. Really, I do. But I need you to understand something. This project isn't just about a dog's physical recovery. It's about teaching my daughter that when something matters, you don't give up just because the odds are against you, even if it ends in disappointment." Ava challenged. "Especially then." Clayton replied firmly. Because the world's going to disappoint her plenty as she grows up. I want her to know that it wasn't because we didn't try hard enough. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a truck horn. A massive delivery vehicle was backing up toward the tank, carrying what appeared to be custom-made stainless steel rails and a complex harness system. That's the support mechanism, Dr. Bryant explained, hurrying over to direct the installation. The harness will suspend Ranger in the water while allowing him freedom of movement. We can gradually decrease the support as his strength improves. If it improves, he added with a cautious glance at Clayton. As the sun began to set over the Texas hills, the irrigation tank had been transformed beyond recognition. Smooth blue tiles now lined the interior, creating a stark contrast to the rough metal exterior. Sophisticated equipment surrounded the structure. Heating units, filtration systems, monitoring devices, and the newly installed solar panels gleaming in the fading light. Inside the guest house, Emily sat cross-legged on the floor beside Ranger's specialized bed, reading aloud from Black Beauty. The German Shepherd's amber eyes followed her animated expressions, his tail occasionally thumping against the cushions. "And tomorrow," Emily whispered, leaning close to Ranger's ear after finishing the chapter. "You get to try your special swimming pool. Daddy says it's almost ready." She stroked his head gently. "I know you're scared, but I'll be right there with you. And soon, you'll be running with me all over the ranch. I just know it." From the doorway, Clayton watched silently, the weight of Emily's unflinching hope settling heavily on his shoulders. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder what would happen if, after all this effort and expense, Ranger's condition remained unchanged. What lesson would that teach his daughter about perseverance and faith? But as he watched Ranger lift his head to nuzzle Emily's hand, Clayton pushed the doubt aside. Some risks were worth taking, regardless of the outcome. This, he was certain, was one of them. Steam rose from the surface of the heated therapy tank as Clayton, Dr. Bryant, and Ava gathered for Ranger's first session. The morning air carried a distinct chill, typical of late autumn in the Texas Hill Country, making the warm water vapor curl and dissipate in mesmerizing patterns. "Water temperature is stable at 92 degrees, Dr. Bryant confirmed, checking the digital display on the control panel. "The harness system is calibrated for his weight, and the cameras are operational." He glanced at Ava. "Are we ready?" Ava reviewed her tablet, which displayed Ranger's latest vitals. "His medication levels are optimal, and the surgical sites have healed well. It's as good a time as any." She looked up at Clayton. "Is Emily coming?" Clayton shook his head. "I thought it best she attend school today. This first session might be challenging. If there's any progress to report, I want it to be a surprise for her." Luis approached with Ranger in the specialized transport wheelchair. The German Shepherd looked alert, his ears perked forward with interest at the new environment. Over the past weeks, his overall health had improved significantly. His coat now shone with vitality, and he'd gained back much of the weight he'd lost during his recovery. "All right, boy," Clayton said softly, kneeling to stroke Ranger's head. "Today's the big day." The next hour proved more difficult than any of them had anticipated. Getting Ranger into the harness system was a delicate operation that required 3 attempts before they successfully secured him. Once suspended over the water, the German Shepherd's body went rigid with anxiety, his normally calm demeanor replaced by nervous panting. "He's stressed," Ava observed, monitoring his heart rate. "We should consider postponing." "Give him a minute," Clayton urged, standing waist-deep in the water. "Ranger, it's okay, boy. You're safe." After what seemed like an eternity, Ranger's breathing steadied, and they carefully lowered him into the water. The specialized harness supported his midsection while allowing his legs to hang freely in the therapeutic environment. "Perfect," Ava said, moving through the water to position herself beside Ranger's hindquarters. "Now we'll start with passive movement therapy. I'll manually move his legs through the proper motions to stimulate the neural pathways." For 45 minutes, Ava gently manipulated Ranger's paralyzed hind legs, guiding them through swimming motions while Clayton provided reassurance from the front. Dr. Bryant monitored the underwater cameras, recording data on muscle engagement and reflex responses. "There's minimal electrical activity in the major muscle groups," Dr. Bryant reported, frowning at his monitors. Though that's to be expected in the first session. Clayton watched Ranger's face closely, searching for signs of discomfort or response. The dog's expression remained stoic, his eyes focused on Clayton as if seeking explanation for this strange new experience. "I think that's enough for today," Ava finally said, noticing Ranger's increasing fatigue. "We'll try again tomorrow." The second day's session proved equally frustrating, as did the third and fourth. By the end of the week, the initial optimism had faded into a routine of technical adjustments and medical observations, with little evidence of progress. "The nerves below the injury site are showing minimal responsiveness," Dr. Bryan explained during their Friday evening review meeting. He displayed a series of readings on his laptop. "We're getting some reflex activity, but nothing that suggests voluntary movement." Clayton rubbed his temples, fatigue evident in the lines of his face. "What's our next step?" Ava hesitated before answering. "Clinically speaking, we should continue the current protocol for at least 3 more weeks before considering alternatives. Neural recovery, when it occurs at all, is typically a slow process." The weekend arrived with a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of the ranch house. Emily, staying for her regular weekend visit, had insisted on helping with Ranger's Saturday therapy despite the weather. Now she sat on the edge of the tank, her legs dangling in the water as she watched Ava work with the German Shepherd. "Can I try?" Emily asked suddenly, during a pause in the exercises. Ava glanced at Clayton, who nodded after a moment's consideration. "Okay, sweetie, but you need to be gentle," Ava instructed, guiding Emily's small hands to Ranger's hind leg. "Like this, smooth, slow movements." Emily bit her lip in concentration as she carefully moved Ranger's leg through the water. "Is this right?" "Perfect," Ava confirmed with an encouraging smile. "Ranger," Emily said, leaning closer to the dog's alert face, "you need to remember how to swim. Remember how your legs work." Her voice took on the tone of absolute certainty that only children can fully master. "You can do it. I know you can." Clayton exchanged glances with Dr. Bryant, both men careful to hide their doubt from the determined 8-year-old. Thunder boomed overhead, momentarily dimming the lights as the backup generator kicked in. Ranger's ears flattened at the sound, his body tensing in the harness. "It's okay," Emily soothed, continuing to work with his legs while keeping her eyes locked with his. "It's just a silly storm. Nothing to be scared of." Whether it was Emily's reassurance, the rhythmic motion of her guided exercises, or simply coincidence, no one could later say for certain. But as another clap of thunder shook the building, Ranger's right hind leg gave a distinct, unmistakable kick. Emily gasped. "Did you see that?" He moved, all by himself. Ava quickly moved to Emily's side, professionally cautious. "It might have been an involuntary spasm, Emily. Sometimes muscles react too." But before she could finish, Ranger's leg moved again, a weak but deliberate pushing motion against Emily's palm. "The monitors are showing voluntary muscle engagement," Dr. Bryan announced, his voice rising with unexpected emotion as he studied the readings. "It's minimal, but it's definitely there." Clayton waded quickly to Ranger's side, his heart pounding. "Do it again, boy. Show us that wasn't a fluke." For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, as Emily continued her gentle encouragement, both hind legs gave a feeble, uncoordinated kick. "There!" Emily cried triumphantly, her face illuminated with joy. "See? I told you." Ranger just needed to remember. Later that evening, after Emily had finally been convinced to go to bed, Clayton sat with Ava and Dr. Bryant in his office, reviewing the data from that breakthrough moment. "It's promising," Dr. Bryant acknowledged, "but I want to be clear. This is just the first step in what will be a very long recovery process, if complete recovery is even possible. The neural pathways are beginning to re-establish," Ava added, more optimistic than she'd been in weeks. "But strength, coordination, and functional mobility are still far down the road." Clayton nodded, turning to look out the window at the therapy tank, now illuminated by security lights in the darkness. "Do you want to know what I think made the difference today?" "Emily," Ava answered without hesitation. "Emily," Clayton confirmed. "Not our expensive equipment or medical expertise, though God knows we needed those too. But that little girl's absolute refusal to accept failure." He turned back to them with a tired smile. "Sometimes faith looks a lot like stubbornness." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind the fresh, clean scent of rain-soaked earth. In the guest house, Ranger slept soundly, his body exhausted from the day's extraordinary effort, unaware that his small victory had just changed everything. The wall calendar in the rehabilitation facility, as everyone now called the converted barn adjacent to the therapy tank, displayed a meticulous record of Ranger's journey. Red X marks tracked daily therapy sessions, blue stars indicated milestone achievements, and yellow circles marked visits from veterinary specialists who had come to witness what many in the profession were beginning to whisper about: the miracle at Miller Ranch. 3 months had passed since Ranger's first voluntary movement in the water. Now, on a crisp February morning, Clayton stood with Dr. Bryant at the edge of the tank, watching as Ava guided Ranger through his exercises. The German Shepherd no longer needed the full support harness. Instead, a modified flotation vest provided minimal assistance while allowing greater freedom of movement. His muscle mass has increased by nearly 30%, Dr. Bryant noted, reviewing the latest measurements on his tablet. And the electromyography readings show consistent nerve signal transmission to all major muscle groups in the hind limbs. Clayton nodded, his eyes fixed on Ranger's determined paddling. The dog's movements were still uneven and lacked the coordination of normal swimming, but the improvement from those first feeble kicks was undeniable. "Time to try the platform again?" Clayton asked, referring to the adjustable depth walkway they had installed in the tank. Dr. Bryant hesitated. "The last attempt was pretty discouraging." "That was 2 weeks ago," Clayton countered. "And Emily insists he's ready." A smile tugged at the engineer's lips. "Well, if Emily says so." Ava guided Ranger toward the submerged platform, which had been adjusted to a depth where the water would still support much of his body weight. "Ready for a little walking practice, buddy?" she asked, her professional detachment long since replaced by genuine affection. Ranger's ears perked up at her tone, his amber eyes alert and focused. When his paws touched the platform, Ava carefully maintained her support under his abdomen while allowing his legs to bear a fraction of his weight. "That's it," she encouraged as Ranger wobbled uncertainly. "Find your balance." For several tense moments, Ranger stood trembling on the platform, his hind legs splayed awkwardly. Then, with visible effort, he pulled his right hind leg forward in an approximation of a step. "Good boy." Ava's professional composure broke into unrestrained excitement. "Again, try it again." The left hind leg followed, shakier, less coordinated, but unmistakably a voluntary step. Then another, and another. Clayton felt his throat tighten as he watched Ranger slowly, painfully navigate the short platform, each step a testament to thousands of hours of therapy and unshakable determination. "I'll be damned," Dr. Bryant whispered, his scientific objectivity momentarily forgotten. "He's actually walking." "No," Clayton corrected with quiet pride. "He's fighting, and winning." That evening, as Emily demonstrated Ranger's new walking ability for her mother, who had driven out from Houston specifically to see the progress, Clayton's phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Rachel Wilson, the veterinary surgeon who had initially recommended euthanasia. "Dr. Wilson," Clayton answered, stepping outside to take the call. "What can I do for you?" "Mr. Miller." Her voice carried a mix of professional interest and reluctant admiration. "I've been reviewing the video footage and medical data you've been sharing with the veterinary community. I have to say, Ranger's progress is unexpected." "That's one word for it," Clayton replied, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from his tone. "Several of my colleagues at the Texas Veterinary Medical Association are quite interested in your rehabilitation methods," she continued. "In fact, we'd like to send a team to observe your setup, if you're amenable." Clayton looked back through the window at Emily, who was beaming as she showed Diane how Ranger could now sit up on command without assistance. "I think that could be arranged." "Excellent. And Mr. Miller?" Dr. Wilson's voice softened slightly. "I'm glad I was wrong about Ranger." The following weeks brought a steady stream of visitors to the ranch: veterinarians, physical therapy specialists, even a documentary crew from a major network. Ranger's story was spreading, his progress meticulously documented and shared throughout the veterinary rehabilitation community. Dr. Bryant had returned to his university position but continued to refine the equipment remotely, collaborating with a team of graduate students who were now working on creating more portable versions of the therapy system. "The university wants to partner on a patent application," he informed Clayton during their weekly video call. They're talking about potential commercialization for veterinary hospitals nationwide. Clayton nodded thoughtfully. What would that look like? Smaller tanks, modular components, simplified control systems, essentially distilling what we've built here into something that could fit in a standard veterinary clinic. Cost? Clayton asked, his businessman's mind automatically calculating. That's the challenge, Dr. Bryant admitted. Even scaled down, we're looking at equipment that would cost clinics upwards of $100,000. Not every pet owner can afford what you've been able to provide for Ranger. The conversation stayed with Clayton long after they hung up. That night, unable to sleep, he found himself sitting beside Ranger's bed in what had become the dog's permanent room in the main house. The German Shepherd dozed peacefully, occasionally twitching in his dreams. "What do you think, boy?" Clayton murmured, scratching behind Ranger's ears. "Should we make sure other dogs get the same chance you did?" Ranger's eyes opened sleepily, his tail thumping against the orthopedic mattress. The next morning, Clayton called an unexpected meeting with Ava, who had delayed her return to California numerous times as Ranger's therapy progressed. "I want to build a center," he announced without preamble, "right here on the ranch. A full-scale rehabilitation facility for injured animals, primarily dogs with spinal injuries like Ranger's." Ava blinked in surprise. "You're talking about a massive undertaking, Clayton. The equipment alone, I'll fund it," he interrupted. "Initial capital, ongoing operational costs, staffing, whatever it takes. But I need a medical director who understands what we're trying to accomplish." He fixed her with a direct gaze. Someone who wasn't afraid to try when everyone else had given up. Ava sat back, momentarily speechless. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a mission," Clayton corrected. "The chance to develop protocols and treatments that could help hundreds, maybe thousands of animals that would otherwise be euthanized. To build something that matters." "And Dr. Bryant?" "Already on board as technical advisor. The university is contributing research support in exchange for data sharing." Ava stood, walking to the window that overlooked the therapy tank where it had all started. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious," Clayton confirmed. "Emily suggested we call it Hope Paws. Said it was a place where hope gets a second chance." A slow smile spread across Ava's face. "Out of the mouths of babes." She turned back to face him. "When do we start?" By late spring, architectural plans for the Hope Paws Rehabilitation Center had been approved. The facility would feature multiple therapy pools, specialized equipment based on Dr. Bryant's designs, and a staff of veterinary rehabilitation specialists. Most importantly, it would operate on a sliding scale fee system, ensuring that financial limitations wouldn't determine which animals received care. As construction crews broke ground on the new facility, Clayton received another unexpected call, this time from the producer of a national morning news program. "Mr. Miller, we'd like to feature Ranger's story as part of our American Inspiration segment," the producer explained. "Our viewers would be moved by what you and your daughter have accomplished." Clayton hesitated, protective of both Emily's privacy and Ranger's still ongoing recovery. "I'll need to think about it." That evening, as he watched Emily guiding Ranger through his daily walking exercises, now conducted on grass, with only a supportive sling for assistance, Clayton made his decision. If Ranger's journey could inspire others to reject limitation and pursue hope against impossible odds, then their story deserved to be told. As if sensing his thoughts, Ranger turned to look at him, those intelligent amber eyes seeming to convey understanding. In that moment, Clayton realized that what had begun as an impulsive rescue had transformed into something far greater, a testament to the power of stubborn compassion and the unexpected paths to healing. The morning of Ranger's scheduled appearance on American Inspirations dawned with a picture-perfect Texas sky, endless blue stretching over the hill country landscape. The television crew had arrived the previous afternoon, setting up equipment around the ranch and conducting preliminary interviews with Clayton, Dr. Bryant, and Ava. Emily, dressed in her favorite blue sundress and cowgirl boots, bounced with barely contained excitement as a makeup artist dabbed powder on her freckled nose. "Is Ranger getting makeup too?" she asked, giggling at the thought. "No, sweetie," the makeup artist replied with a smile. "Ranger is perfect just as he is." Clayton watched from the doorway, his own interview complete. The producer, a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa, approached with her clipboard. "We'll start with the background segments," she explained. then move to the current therapy demonstration and end with Ranger's story today. The walking sequence with the support harness will make a powerful closing shot. Clayton nodded, though something about her planned narrative structure didn't sit quite right with him. Before he could voice his concerns, Luis appeared at his side. "Boss, there's something you should see," the ranch manager said quietly, gesturing toward the guest house. "It's Ranger." Clayton excused himself and followed Luis across the yard, anxiety building with each step. Had there been a setback? Was Ranger stressed by all the unfamiliar people and equipment? What he found instead left him momentarily speechless. Ranger was standing, fully standing, beside his bed, without his supportive harness. Ava knelt nearby, her face a mixture of disbelief and elation. "He just got up," she said, looking up at Clayton. "I came in to get him ready for the filming, and he was restless. When I opened his bed, instead of waiting for the harness, he just stood up." Clayton approached slowly, afraid that any sudden movement might break the spell. Ranger's stance was slightly awkward, his hind legs positioned more widely than normal for better balance, but he was unquestionably supporting his own weight. "Good boy," Clayton whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You magnificent, stubborn animal." Ranger's tail wagged steadily, his amber eyes bright with what looked remarkably like pride. Clayton turned to Luis. "Find Emily. Bring her here, but don't tell her why." When Emily arrived minutes later, Clayton stood blocking her view of Ranger. "Sweetie, I want you to call Ranger to you, just like you always do." Emily looked confused but complied. "Ranger, come here, boy." Clayton stepped aside, holding his breath. For a heart-stopping moment, Ranger didn't move, his legs trembling with effort. Then, with deliberate concentration, he took one shaky step forward. Then another. Emily's eyes widened, her hands flying to her mouth. "Daddy, the harness. He doesn't have his harness." "I know, Em," Clayton said softly, watching as Ranger continued his slow, determined progress across the room. Each step was labored and unsteady, but unmistakably independent. When Ranger finally reached Emily, his journey of perhaps 10 feet having taken nearly a minute, the little girl dropped to her knees and threw her arms around his neck, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she sobbed into his fur. "You did it, Ranger. I knew you would." The commotion had drawn others to the doorway. Ava, Dr. Bryant, even the television crew, who had instinctively begun filming the unexpected moment. Vanessa stood wide-eyed, her carefully planned segment forgotten as the real story unfolded before her. No one spoke as they watched Emily crooning praise to Ranger, whose entire body seemed to vibrate with happiness despite the obvious effort of remaining standing. It was Dr. Bryant who finally broke the silence, his scientific objectivity momentarily abandoned as he whispered, "My God, he's actually done it." Ava wiped tears from her cheeks, not bothering to hide her emotion. "In 20 years of veterinary practice, I've never..." She trailed off, shaking her head in wonder. The next few hours passed in a blur of excitement and impromptu planning. The television segment was completely restructured around Ranger's breakthrough, with Emily insisting that his first public walk should happen during the broadcast. "It's perfect," she declared with the absolute confidence of an 8-year-old. "Everyone in America can see that miracles really happen." Clayton didn't have the heart to explain that Ranger's recovery had far more to do with cutting-edge medical technology, thousands of hours of therapy, and sheer determination than anything miraculous. Besides, watching his daughter's radiant face as she helped prepare Ranger for his television debut, he wasn't entirely sure she was wrong. By mid-morning, a small audience had gathered on the lawn near the therapy tank. Ranch employees, construction workers from the Hopaw's site, and several neighboring ranchers who had heard about the excitement through the local grapevine. The host of American Inspirations, a warm-voiced woman named Rebecca Moore, had set up with Clayton, Emily, and the medical team for the introduction segment. Today, we're bringing you the extraordinary story of one dog's journey from hopeless case to walking miracle. Rebecca began, her practice delivery nonetheless carrying genuine emotion. 8 months ago, Clayton Miller found an injured German Shepherd on his Texas ranch. Veterinarians unanimously recommended euthanasia, but Clayton and his daughter Emily refused to give up. The cameras panned to the therapy tank, where Dr. Bryant explained the technology they had developed. Ava demonstrated the rehabilitation techniques that had become the foundation of the Hope Pause methodology. But the real moment everyone was waiting for came when Rebecca turned to Emily. "Emily, I understand Ranger has a very special achievement to show us today." Emily nodded solemnly. Her earlier excitement transformed into focused determination. "Ranger has been practicing really hard," she explained. "And today, he wants to show everyone that you should never, ever give up, even when everyone says you can't do something." The cameras followed as Emily led the group to an open area of lawn where Ranger waited with Luis. The German Shepherd was wearing his therapy vest, a concession to safety that Ava had insisted upon, but no supportive harness or sling. A hushed anticipation fell over the gathered crowd as Emily knelt about 20 feet away from Ranger. "Ready, Ranger?" she called, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Come here, boy." For a terrifying moment, Clayton thought it wouldn't happen. Ranger stood frozen, perhaps overwhelmed by the audience and cameras. But then, almost imperceptibly at first, he began to move. One careful step, then another. His gait was stiff and mechanical, nothing like the fluid movement of a healthy dog, but it was unmistakably walking. The crowd remained silent, collectively holding their breath as Ranger made his way across the grass. Clayton felt a hand slip into his and looked down to find Ava beside him, her fingers gripping his tightly as they watched. When Ranger finally reached Emily, completing his journey without faltering, the silence broke into spontaneous applause and cheers. Ranch hands wiped tears from weathered faces. Dr. Bryant pumped his fist in the air in a most unprofessional display of triumph. Even the seasoned television crew seemed affected, the camera operator quickly wiping his eye before refocusing on Emily as she buried her face in Ranger's neck. Clayton found himself surrounded by congratulatory handshakes and pats on the back, but his eyes remained fixed on his daughter and the dog that had changed both their lives. In that moment, watching Emily's unrestrained joy and Ranger's quiet dignity, Clayton understood that they had achieved something far more significant than a medical breakthrough or heartwarming television segment. They had proven that some battles are worth fighting, even, perhaps especially, when victory seems impossible. As the broadcast wrapped up, Rebecca approached Clayton one last time. "I understand the Hope Pause Center will be opening its doors in a few months," she said. "What do you hope it will accomplish?" Clayton glanced over at Ranger, now resting comfortably with his head in Emily's lap as she chattered excitedly to Ava about plans for his continued therapy. "There are thousands of animals euthanized every year because their injuries are deemed too severe, their recoveries too unlikely," he replied. "Hope Pause exists to challenge that assumption, to give those animals the same chance Ranger had. Because sometimes, all it takes is someone stubborn enough to believe that impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet." As the cameras finally stopped rolling and the crew began packing up their equipment, Clayton found himself standing alone by the therapy tank where it had all begun. The technical marvel that had been cutting-edge medical innovation 8 months ago now seemed almost primitive compared to the sophisticated facility under construction just beyond the hill. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ava asked, joining him. Clayton smiled, watching as Emily led Ranger on a slow, careful walk around the yard, shouting encouragement with each successful step. "I was just thinking that sometimes the best business decisions have nothing to do with business at all." 9 months after Ranger's television debut, the grand opening of the Hope Pause Rehabilitation Center transformed the normally quiet Miller Ranch into a hub of activity. Cars lined the carefully marked parking areas, while a small fleet of news vans occupied spaces reserved for media. A large white tent had been erected on the lawn in front of the newly completed facility, providing shade for the hundreds of guests who had come to witness what many were calling a revolution in veterinary rehabilitation. The 15,000-square-foot center gleamed in the Texas sunlight, a modern blend of limestone, glass, and steel that somehow managed to complement rather than clash with the traditional ranch architecture. For therapy pools of varying sizes were visible through the expansive windows, along with cutting-edge rehabilitation equipment and a team of specialists in matching navy scrubs with the Hope Pause paw print logo embroidered on the chest. Inside the main atrium, Clayton adjusted his tie nervously, unaccustomed to the formal attire he'd reluctantly agreed to wear for the occasion. His typical jeans and work shirt had been replaced with a tailored suit at the insistence of the public relations team, now handling Hope Paw's media presence. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad, not cut a ribbon," Ava remarked, approaching in a navy blue dress that complemented the facility's color scheme. As Hope Paw's medical director, she had spent the past 6 months recruiting staff, developing treatment protocols, and overseeing equipment installation. "I'd prefer the firing squad," Clayton muttered. "I build things. I don't make speeches about them." "Well, you'd better get comfortable with it," she replied, straightening his tie with a familiar gesture that suggested their professional relationship had evolved into something more complex during the months of collaboration. "Because after today, everyone's going to want to hear from the man who built a multi-million-dollar rehabilitation center for dogs who were supposed to be beyond saving." Before Clayton could respond, Emily bounded up, resplendent in a blue dress nearly identical to Ava's. At 9 years old now, she had grown an inch taller since finding Ranger, but her freckles and infectious enthusiasm remained unchanged. "Daddy, you have to come see. Dr. Bryant is showing people Ranger's case study in the education center, and there's a giant picture of us on the wall." She tugged at his hand insistently. "In a minute, sweetheart," Clayton promised. "Are you ready for your part in the ceremony?" Emily nodded solemnly. "Ranger and I have been practicing all week. He's a little nervous with all the people, but he'll be okay once we start." As if on cue, Luis approached with Ranger walking carefully at his side. The German Shepherd's gait had improved dramatically over the past months, though a keen observer could still detect the slight stiffness in his hind legs. He wore a custom-made therapy vest emblazoned with the Hope Paws logo, the facility's first official ambassador. "There he is," Clayton said, crouching to greet the dog who had changed the trajectory of his life. "Ready for your big moment, boy?" Ranger's tail wagged steadily as he pressed his head into Clayton's hand, a gesture that had become his signature display of affection. Mr. Miller, a young coordinator from the PR team, approached tentatively, clipboard in hand. "We're ready to begin whenever you are. The governor's aide says he's on a tight schedule." Clayton nodded, taking a deep breath as he straightened. "Let's do this." The ceremony outside was more elaborate than Clayton had initially wanted, but he'd eventually yielded to the PR team's insistence that Hope Paw's launch needed to make a significant impact. Now, looking at the assembled crowd, veterinary professionals, donors, media, and families with their pets, he had to admit they might have been right. From her front row seat, Diane caught his eye and gave an encouraging nod. Their relationship had improved significantly over the past year, the shared pride in Emily's role in Ranger's recovery providing a bridge across old hurts. At the podium, the governor of Texas was concluding his remarks. "And so it gives me great pleasure to recognize Hope Paws as not just an innovative medical facility, but as a testament to Texas' ingenuity, determination, and heart." Applause rippled through the crowd as Clayton was introduced. He approached the microphone, glancing down at the prepared remarks he had no intention of following. "Thank you, Governor," he began, tucking the speech into his pocket. "I'm not much for formal speeches, so I hope you'll forgive me if I speak from the heart instead." A murmur of approval moved through the audience. 18 months ago, I found an injured German Shepherd under an orange tree on this property. Every expert I consulted told me the kindest thing to do would be to put him down. His injuries were too severe. His chances of recovery were non-existent. Clayton paused, his eyes finding Ranger and Emily in the front row. But sometimes, the experts can be wrong. Sometimes, the impossible just hasn't been attempted with enough stubbornness yet. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. Hope Paws exists because of 3 things: cutting-edge medical technology, brilliant minds willing to challenge conventional wisdom, and the unwavering belief of a little girl who refused to accept that her dog couldn't walk again. Clayton's voice roughened slightly. "Today, we open our doors to animals who have been deemed beyond hope. We offer their families something precious, a chance. Not a guarantee, but a fighting chance backed by the best equipment, the most dedicated staff, and a philosophy that believes giving up should always be the last option, never the first." He gestured to the building behind him. Inside this facility are 4 therapy pools, a hydrotherapy treadmill, laser therapy units, and electromyography equipment. All adaptations of the technology we developed for one dog. But more importantly, inside are 28 staff members who share a commitment to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in animal rehabilitation. Clayton glanced at his notes, but pushed them aside again. We've already accepted our first 12 patients, dogs with injuries similar to Ranger's. Their families had been told, just as I was, that euthanasia was the only humane option. But thanks to the generous founding donors and a sliding scale payment system, these families now have hope. And that's what Hope Paws is really about. Hope with a purpose, hope backed by action. He turned slightly, gesturing to Emily and Ranger. Now, I'd like to invite my daughter Emily and the dog who started it all to help us officially open the Hope Paws Rehabilitation Center. A collective "ah" went through the audience as Emily, her face solemn with the importance of the moment, led Ranger carefully toward the ceremonial ribbon stretching across the facility's entrance. Clayton handed her a comically oversized pair of scissors, helping her position them on the navy blue ribbon. "Ready?" he whispered. Emily nodded, her small hands gripping the scissors determinedly. With a clean snip, the ribbon fell away, and the crowd burst into applause. Cameras flashed as Emily knelt to hug Ranger, who responded by licking her cheek enthusiastically. The formal portion of the ceremony complete, guests began streaming toward the facility for tours, refreshments, and demonstrations of the therapeutic equipment. Clayton found himself pulled into conversations with donors, veterinary professionals, and media representatives, all eager to learn more about Hope Paws' innovative approach. Dr. Bryant, now serving as the center's technical director while maintaining his university position, had set up a presentation in the education wing, where he was explaining the science behind Ranger's recovery to an enthralled group of veterinary students. The combination of hydrotherapy, electrical stimulation, and progressive weight-bearing exercises creates a comprehensive approach to neural pathway regeneration, he explained, pointing to detailed diagrams. What we've discovered through Ranger's case is that the traditional timeline for declaring recovery impossible may be far too conservative. In another room, Ava was demonstrating assessment techniques with a recently admitted patient, a Labrador retriever named Coco who had been injured in a car accident 2 weeks earlier. "The initial evaluation establishes our baseline," she explained to the watching veterinarians. "From there, we develop a customized treatment plan that evolves as the patient responds." Emily had appointed herself Ranger's official handler for the event, proudly leading him through the facility and introducing him to anyone who showed interest. "This is Ranger," she told a group of children gathered around him. "The doctors said he would never walk again, but they were wrong. Now he helps other dogs learn to walk too." As the afternoon progressed, Clayton found a quiet moment to slip away to his office, a simply furnished room with large windows overlooking the therapy garden where recovering patients could practice walking on various natural surfaces. On his desk sat a framed photograph of Emily and Ranger from that first day in the therapy tank, both looking uncertain but determined. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Ava entered, carrying 2 glasses of champagne from the reception. "Hiding?" she asked, offering him a glass. "Strategic retreat," he corrected with a smile. "How are the tours going?" "Incredible. We've already received inquiries about treatment from as far away as Canada and the UK. She settled into the chair across from him. "And the research partnership with the university has 5 new graduate students signed up to help refine the methods." Clayton nodded, the magnitude of what they had created finally beginning to sink in. "Did you ever imagine, when you first flew out here to look at a rich man's expensive attempt to save one dog, that it would turn into all this?" Ava laughed softly. "Not even close. I thought I'd be here for 2 weeks, deliver the hard news that your dog would never recover, and fly back to my practice in California. And instead, I found myself working with the 2 most stubborn individuals I've ever met, you and your daughter." She raised her glass in a toast. "To impossible things." Clayton clinked his glass against hers. "To impossible things." Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grounds of what had been simply Clayton Miller's ranch and was now the home of a center that would redefine veterinary rehabilitation. Through the window, he could see Emily still proudly escorting Ranger around the gardens, the German Shepherd's steady, determined gait a living testament to the center's mission. In that moment, Clayton knew with absolute certainty that finding an injured dog under an orange tree had been more than chance. It had been the beginning of something that would outlast all of them, a legacy built on the simple, powerful belief that giving up should never be the first option. 1 year to the day after the grand opening of Hope Paws, the city of Austin closed off 6 blocks of downtown for what the mayor had officially proclaimed as Ranger Day. What had begun as a small ceremony recognizing the rehabilitation center's first anniversary had evolved into something much larger when the governor's office, impressed by Hope Paw's growing national reputation, suggested a more public celebration. Now, beneath a perfect Texas sky, spectators lined Congress Avenue as the parade preparations entered their final stages. Colorful banners bearing the Hope Paws logo and silhouettes of dogs in various stages of rehabilitation hung from lampposts, fluttering in the gentle spring breeze. Clayton stood at the staging area, tugging uncomfortably at the collar of his dress shirt. Despite a year of public appearances and speeches promoting Hope Paws, he still felt out of place in formal attire. "You'd think I'd be used to this by now," he muttered to Ava, who looked far more comfortable in her tailored blazer and Hope Paws scarf. "Some things never change," she replied with an affectionate smile, straightening his collar. Her hand lingered briefly on his shoulder, a gesture that would have seemed impossible 18 months earlier when they'd been wary professional acquaintances. Now, as both medical director of Hope Paws and an increasingly important presence in the Miller family's life, Ava moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. "Where's Emily?" Clayton asked, scanning the growing crowd of parade participants. The question was barely out of his mouth when he spotted his daughter, now 10 years old, hurrying toward them with Ranger walking steadily at her side. The German Shepherd's transformation was remarkable to anyone who had known him during those early days. While his gait would never be as fluid as that of a dog who had never been injured, he moved with a dignified confidence that belied the dire prognosis he had once received. His coat gleamed with health, and the special vest he wore, embedded with sensors developed by Dr. Bryant to monitor muscle activity during movement, featured a miniature camera that would broadcast his perspective of the parade to the Hope Paws website. "Daddy, Ava, they're almost ready for us," Emily called, her excitement palpable. She wore a custom-made cowgirl outfit in Hope Paws blue, complete with boots embroidered with tiny paw prints. "The mayor says Ranger, and I get to lead the whole parade." "That's quite an honor," Clayton replied, kneeling to greet Ranger, who pressed his head affectionately against Clayton's hand in their familiar ritual of connection. "Mr. Miller?" A parade coordinator appeared with a clipboard. "We're ready for your family at the lead car." The family designation wasn't lost on Clayton, who caught Ava's eye with a small smile. The past year had blurred many lines, professional, personal, and everything in between. "We'll be right there," he assured the coordinator before turning back to Emily. "Ready for your big moment, cowgirl?" Emily nodded solemnly, though excitement danced in her eyes. "Ranger and I have been practicing our royal waves," she explained, demonstrating a perfect princess-style hand movement that made both adults laugh. The lead vehicle, an open-top vintage Cadillac convertible in a color that matched the Hope Paws blue, waited at the head of the parade. But as they approached, Emily stopped suddenly. "Wait," she said, her expression turning serious. "I have an idea. Can Ranger and I walk instead of riding? Just for the last block? To show everyone how good he is now." Clayton exchanged glances with Ava, who gave a small nod. "If that's what you want, Em," he agreed. "But you'll ride in the car for most of the route, right?" "It's a long parade." "Just the last block," Emily confirmed. The important part. As they settled into the convertible, Clayton and Ava in the back seat, Emily in the front with Ranger carefully positioned beside her, the mayor approached for a final word. "Quite a day for Hope Paws," he remarked, shaking Clayton's hand. "The governor tells me you've received inquiries about establishing similar centers in 14 states now." 17 as of yesterday, Ava corrected with a smile. "And 3 countries. We're developing certification protocols for affiliate centers that want to implement our methods." The mayor nodded approvingly. From one dog to an international program in less than 2 years. That's the kind of innovation that makes Texas proud. A sudden fanfare from the lead band signaled the parade's start, ending their conversation as the convertible began to move forward. The crowd's cheers swelled as people recognized Ranger, many holding signs with messages like, "Go Ranger," and "Hope Paws, save my dog's life." Emily waved enthusiastically, occasionally pointing out particularly creative signs to Ranger, who sat regally beside her, seemingly aware of his importance to the proceedings. Behind them stretched a procession that told the story of Hope Paw's first year, veterinary staff walking with patients in various stages of recovery, the university research team with displays of their technical innovations, and families whose pets had been given second chances through the center's work. As they approached the final block of the parade route, where the street widened into a plaza in front of the Capitol building, Emily turned to Clayton with determination in her eyes. "It's time," she said. The convertible slowed to a stop as planned, and a small set of stairs was brought to allow Ranger and Emily to descend safely. A hush fell over the crowd as they realized something unscheduled was happening. Clayton and Ava exited the car as well, standing back as Emily led Ranger to the start of the block-long stretch leading to the main reviewing stand. The parade behind them had paused, all eyes now focused on the small girl and the German shepherd preparing for their walk. "Ladies and gentlemen," the parade announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Emily Miller and Ranger would like to demonstrate just how far they've come on their journey together." Emily knelt beside Ranger, whispering something in his ear that made his tail wag enthusiastically. Then, straightening her shoulders, she removed his leash entirely, a gesture that drew gasps from those who knew their story. "Ready, boy?" Emily's voice carried clearly in the expectant silence. With deliberate dignity, Ranger positioned himself at her side, his amber eyes focused on the path ahead. Emily stepped forward, and Ranger moved with her, his gait steady, his steps measured but confident, walking completely independently beside the little girl who had never stopped believing in him. The crowd erupted into cheers as they began their journey down the block, Emily's small hand resting lightly on Ranger's back, not for support, but for connection. Camera flashes sparkled like stars around them, capturing the moment for news outlets across the country. Clayton felt Ava's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. "Look at them," she whispered, her professional composure momentarily forgotten as tears glistened in her eyes. "Just look at what they've done." What Clayton saw was more than a rehabilitated dog and a jubilant child. He saw living proof that determination could rewrite medical certainties, that compassion could build something lasting, that a single choice made from the heart could spark a movement. At the reviewing stand, the governor stood with Dr. Bryant and Dr. Wilson, the veterinary surgeon who had initially recommended euthanasia and who now served on Hope Paw's medical advisory board. As Emily and Ranger approached, the entire assembly rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Emily, overwhelmed by the moment, stopped a few feet from the stand. Ranger paused beside her, looking up as if checking that she was okay. Then, in a move that no one had trained him to perform, he sat perfectly at her side, his posture regal, his gaze steady, the picture of a dog who knew his own worth. The crowd's cheers intensified, washing over them in waves of approval and amazement. Emily's face shone with joy as she dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around Ranger's neck in a fierce hug that spoke more eloquently than any speech could have. Later, after the parade had concluded and the formal speeches had been delivered, Clayton found a quiet moment with Emily and Ranger in the shade of a live oak on the Capitol grounds. The German shepherd lay contentedly at Emily's feet, tired from the day's events, but visibly proud of his performance. "You did good today, Em," Clayton said, sitting beside his daughter on the grass. "Both of you did." Emily leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that was becoming rarer as she grew more independent. "Daddy," she said thoughtfully, "do you remember when Dr. Wilson said Ranger would never walk again?" "I do," Clayton nodded. "And you said we should try anyway, even though everyone thought it was impossible?" "I remember." Emily looked up at him, her expression serious beyond her years. "That was the most important thing you ever taught me." "What's that, sweetheart?" "That just because someone says something is impossible doesn't mean you have to believe them." She reached down to stroke Ranger's head. "Sometimes they're wrong, and you never know unless you try." Clayton felt his throat tighten with emotion as he looked at his daughter, no longer the little girl who had first bonded with an injured dog, but growing into a young person with a profound understanding of persistence and hope. Across the lawn, he could see Ava speaking with a group of veterinary students who had volunteered at the parade. She caught his eye and smiled, a private moment of connection amid the public celebration. "You know," Clayton said, turning back to Emily, When I found Ranger under that orange tree, I had no idea how much he would change our lives." Emily nodded sagely. "That's because he wasn't just a dog who needed saving, Daddy. He was the dog who was going to teach us how to save all the others." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Capitol grounds, Clayton realized that Emily had articulated exactly what Ranger had become. Not just a success story or the inspiration for Hope Paws, but a living embodiment of the principle that guided their work. That every life deserved a chance, that limitations could be overcome, and that sometimes the most important journeys began with a single, seemingly impossible step. Ranger, as if sensing the weight of the moment, lifted his head to meet Clayton's gaze, his amber eyes reflecting the wisdom that comes only from having traveled a hard road and found the strength to keep moving forward. In that silent exchange between man and dog was everything that had brought them to this moment: trust, determination, and the profound bond that forms when two beings face the impossible together and refuse to surrender. Around them, the sounds of the celebration continued, but in this quiet corner beneath the live oak, something more significant was being acknowledged: the completion of one remarkable journey and the continuation of a legacy that would change countless lives for years to come. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and if you've watched this far, comment "I watched to the end" and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's super emotional.